where do you think the ethical lines are? Like, if you're sitting in that, I don't know, monthly project meeting with the colossal team, and Ben is there and Beth is there, like and all the investors are there, and like they're thinking, okay, like what's the next project? Like I'm curious, like where your line is, where like what could be brought up at that table where you're just like, no, we shouldn't do that. That's like that's marketing, or that's for investors, or that's for a museum, or that's for a new Jurassic Park movie. We're not doing that. Like where do you see that line?
I think for all of the projects, there has to be a conservation side to it. So whether that is the core species itself or demonstrating something in the core species is going to give us some, ability to fund conservation for that group of animals in a way that we haven't been able to do before. I think that for me is what it really is all about. And when you've got that final species, whatever we're trying to do with that conservation piece, it needs to have an ecosystem to go back into and somewhere that you can actually have that animal back in the landscape. All of these technologies that we've worked so hard to develop are about restoring and rebuilding lost biodiversity. So as long as we're always on that mission, and Colossal is, right? So this is really why I partnered with them in the first place, is because they're so clear about that mission, and everything that we do has this immediate conservation applications that we apply all of those technologies to. And I think for me, that was just so incredibly refreshing, and being able to do this science at a scale that I would never be able to do without typical funding schemes. It's
Yeah.
just, I've been able to move the needle on conservation genetics in a way that I never would have thought possible in my career time. I truly feel like I'm the luckiest scientist on the planet. I get that I
Yeah.
have the coolest job, and, I love the work that I do, and I really profoundly believe it's going to make a huge difference to our planet moving forward.
Yeah. No, I 100% believe you. You're a great spokesperson. Do you see the slippery slope of someone making an argument like, okay, how much conservation could we fund by engineering this sort of T-Rex duplicate? Like by getting really science fictiony here, but
Yeah,
like 10,
yeah,
20 years down the line, we've no idea where genetic technology is going to be. I could see this investor boardroom meeting happening where people are like, right, we have the woolly mammoths are chomping down the tundras. We've done
yeah,
amazing work, all this, but now there's this other project we need to fund. The only way that we can raise that money is by engineering some weird synthetic animal that's never existed, and it's going to be in some sort of artificial environment. And you could see how they would rationalize that on the basis of, but we're going to raise so much money for conservation, right? And I
yeah,
don't even know if it necessarily has to be so crazy that it's some synthetic dinosaur thing. It could just be some kind
yeah.
of genetic chimera of some sort that is sort of, I don't know, half eagle, half dog. It doesn't have to be that dramatic, but just anything that isn't natural, I guess.
Yeah.
Is this completely crazy, or do you see some board meeting 20 years down the line where this is being discussed and this could be this could be a thing that people want to do?
I will say at the moment, like recreating these lost genomes is really challenging, just because we
Yeah.
don't understand how all of those parts of a genome interact together. But we know there are these complex interactions between every single part of our 3 billion letter code. So rebuilding something that we know existed and produced a healthy animal is one thing, because we know exactly, we've got the picture on the box, right? We've got the puzzle picture. We can rebuild that puzzle and make it look exactly like the picture. But if we're trying to create something that we don't have that blueprint for, where we don't have that genome, I think we certainly don't have the technology now. Whether
Yeah.
we ever will in the future, I don't know, but we certainly don't have it at the moment. That would be a really, really challenging thing to do. And I think, this is what I was talking about before, about having those discussions around where we want to use this technology, maybe where we don't want to use this technology. I think they're the kinds of discussions that I would love the planet to have around the use of this. Not that we shouldn't be doing this technology, because we absolutely need to, but rather, are there things like that if we're going to create, some artificial species, that maybe we have rules around what you can do in that space or not?
Yeah. Such an interesting conversation.
Yeah,
It's just so uncertain, right? Because genetic technologies have been on this crazy exponential increase in what is possible, and decreasing the costs. It's like
yeah,
even in human genetic editing, there's a lot of conversations at the moment that are strange and weird, and people don't really know the
yeah,
answers to it. And everyone's sort of saying, well, it's not possible now. But what I kind of fear is that it's going to become possible so soon, and we won't have had all the necessary conversations about it to be like, well, how the hell do we feel about this? Like, should we be able to increase intelligence by 5 points in an embryo, or are
Yeah,
we okay with 2 extra inches? Or like, there's all of these weird things that definitely might be
yeah.
possible. We don't know, but they might be possible down the line. And I just kind of want to start these conversations now because it probably requires 5 years of bickering and not agreeing
Oh,
to have any idea of how society should deal with that when it's possible, you know?
and we're desperate to start those conversations. So,
Yeah.
on all of these projects, again, we're working with local governments, with the country's governments around what it would look like to rewild the Tasmanian tiger. The problem is because that event horizon for it is still, 5+ years, they're like, oh, well, it's not our problem. We don't have to have these discussions. We're like, no, we need to be thinking about this now
Yeah.
because these things are going to catch up really quickly. And it's important to start thinking about how we want to treat these animals. Right now, for example, if you create a genetically modified animal and you put it back into the landscape, it would be considered a GMO. So just a genetically modified organism. So therefore, it doesn't have the same endangered status as you would have for a wildlife
Oh.
animal. So there are things like that around policy that we simply, I mean, it's nuts for it not to, right? But we have to change those policies for going, this is not a GMO. So therefore, there's no regulations around anything, if you want to kill that animal, you can do it because it's not considered native wildlife. There are things like that that we have to work on changing policy. And we do work and help advise big consortiums like the IUCN who make policy around these things about what is the reasonable use of genetic engineering for wildlife and conservation purposes. And they're developing policies around this to try and help inform nations around the world about what is reasonable and what isn't. And these are consortiums of the world's leading scientists that are all coming together to try and help design these policy guideline documents that hopefully then governments in different countries can use as a basis for helping inform some opinions around when and where we want to use this technology. So we are working on
Right.
that in the background as well. It's just that's an even harder thing than engineering an extinct species back into existence is dealing with public policy.
Yeah, I totally believe it. Like I'm picturing you having this conversation with, I don't know, the government of Tasmania and saying, like, we're a private company. We really mean good, but we're going to introduce all of these genetically engineered apex predators onto your island. And like, we're just going to see it. I know that's not what you're doing, but
Yeah.
in a high level way, if someone isn't familiar with the science, that sort of is what they're going to get. And they're going to be like, holy shit, should we do that? Like if they're five
So a
percent
great
more
example of
aggressive.
this, right, is with the Tasmanian tiger. So Colossal put together the TTAC, which is the Tasmanian Thylacine Advisory Committee. And so we have representatives
Amazing.
from local government, obviously First Nations people, critical part of that in Tasmania, forestry, farming, tourism. We've got representatives from all of the major stakeholders across Tasmania. And I meet with them every single quarter to update them on where we're at in the Tasmanian Tiger Project and to start talking about this runway for when we have the animal, where can we first put them? Where would be the first place to do it? How do people want to see this first release of these animals into the wildlife go? How are we going to monitor them? Who are the right partners to be interacting with to be able to monitor this population effectively so that we don't hit this hurdle? So that's
Yeah.
exactly what we're trying to get to, Evan, is that we don't want to end up with having the animal and then having everybody go, hang on a second, we're not ready for this. So we're going to make sure that by
Yeah.
the time that animal is ready, that we have everything in place and all of that buy-in across community for really putting that animal back into the landscape and having everybody passionately behind why it's so important to do it and doing it in that right way.
Yeah, like that would
Yeah,
be a tragic scenario, right? If you actually pull off this scientific breakthrough and they're ready to go, and then the government gets cold feet or
yeah,
power changes, a new person comes in and it's like, what the hell? We're not going to release apex predators across. Like, we don't know what the hell that would get. Like that would be a truly tragic scenario, right?
yeah.
So that ongoing dialogue is essential at
But
every
you
stage of the
get that
process.
whole community behind why this is so important and understanding the fundamentals of why we need to do this. And then, that's something that even that, a new switching government can't really block if it's what everybody wants. So I think having that's why I'm so passionate about
Yeah,
communicating about this and doing all of this outreach is because having the public really understand the importance of these new technologies And understanding why we need to do it, I think, is just so fundamentally important.
It's why I've wanted to spread this message as well. And I think you've been a perfect spokesperson for it. I think you've been able to answer every question super well, from the gene technology to the really science fiction, bizarre stuff. I think this has been so fun. And I want to keep having these conversations.
The Giant Shoulder mission is to explore radical ideas in biology, neuroscience, and consciousness, and elevate those stories to the highest possible level while keeping them accessible to everyone. If this interests you and you want to support independent science, then please consider subscribing to the Clips channel. Check out our 26 Neuroscience book. You can download it for free